Sarah Chin looked like any other school teacher, quiet, boring, afraid of loud noises. Her students thought she'd never been on a plane. They had no idea their math teacher was once the Navy's deadliest pilot. Until enemy jets threatened America and they dragged her back to war. Before watching full story, comment below from where are you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Sarah Chin looked like the most ordinary person in the world. She was 42 years old and taught math to 8-year-old kids at Meadowbrook Elementary School in Ohio. Every morning she wore simple clothes, plain sweaters, dark pants, comfortable shoes. Her brown hair was always pulled back in a neat ponytail. She spoke in a soft, gentle voice that never got loud, even when the children were being difficult. To everyone who knew her, Sarah was just Miss Chin, the quiet teacher who had worked at the same school for 8 years. She lived alone in a small apartment, drove an old Honda Civic and never caused any trouble. Her fellow teachers thought she was a little boring. The children liked her because she was patient and kind, but they also thought she was afraid of everything exciting. On this particular Tuesday morning in October, Sarah stood at the front of her classroom writing math problems on the whiteboard. 22 third graders sat at their desks, some paying attention, others drawing pictures or staring out the window. "Remember, class," Sarah said in her calm voice, "when you multiply fractions, you multiply the top numbers together and the bottom numbers together." Little Tommy Rodriguez raised his hand high in the air. He was 8 years old with messy black hair and a gap where his front teeth used to be. "Yes, Tommy?" Sarah asked. "Miss Chin, my dad took me to the airport last weekend. He said you've probably never been on a plane because you're scared of flying. Is that true?" Sarah stopped writing on the board. The piece of chalk trembled slightly in her hand. For just a moment, something dark and painful flashed across her face. But the children didn't notice because they were busy looking at Tommy. "Flying just isn't for me, Tommy," Sarah said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Now, who can solve this next problem for us?" She turned back to the whiteboard, but her hand was shaking now. She set the chalk down carefully and took a deep breath. What Tommy and the other children didn't know was that Sarah had flown more hours than most airline pilots. She had flown fighter jets at speeds faster than sound itself. She had flown in combat missions where people were trying to kill her. She had been one of the best pilots in the entire United States military. But that was 13 years ago. That was a different person. That person was dead and buried, and Sarah intended to keep it that way. After school ended at 3:30, Sarah walked across the parking lot to her old car. The October air was crisp and clean, with yellow and red leaves falling from the trees around the school. She was putting her bag in the back seat when she heard someone calling her name. "Sarah. Wait up." It was Janet Morris, another third-grade teacher. Janet was 45 years old, married with 2 teenage kids, and always trying to get Sarah to be more social. She jogged across the parking lot, her high heels clicking on the asphalt. "Hey girl," Janet said, slightly out of breath. "Listen, Jim and I are taking the kids to the air show at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base this weekend. They're going to have F-16s, F-22 Raptors, the whole 9 yards. You should totally come with us." Sarah felt her stomach clench. Wright-Patterson was only an hour away. She had been stationed there years ago, back when she was a different person living a different life. "Thanks, Janet, but I think I'll pass. Those things are way too loud for me." Janet laughed. "Oh, come on, Sarah. Don't you ever want some excitement in your life? You're like a hermit. When's the last time you did anything fun?" Sarah forced a smile onto her face. "I like quiet weekends. Besides, I have papers to grade." "You always have papers to grade. Live a little." Janet shook her head. "Sometimes I wonder if you've ever done anything exciting in your whole life." "If only you knew," Sarah thought. But out loud she just said, "I'm happy with my boring life." Janet shrugged and walked away, muttering something about Sarah being hopeless. Sarah got in her car and drove home, but she couldn't stop thinking about Janet's words. F-22 Raptors. She knew those aircraft better than most people knew their own cars. Sarah lived in a small apartment complex on the edge of town. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor, neat and clean and completely unremarkable. The furniture was plain and practical. The walls had no photographs on them. There were no military items anywhere, nothing that would give away her past. That evening, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table grading math worksheets. She had a red pen in her hand and was marking where students had made mistakes. Everything was peaceful and quiet, just the way she liked it. Then her phone rang. Sarah looked at the caller ID. It said unknown number. She almost didn't answer it, but something made her pick it up. "Hello? Is this Sarah Chin?" The voice on the other end was male, official sounding with a slight Texas accent. "Yes, this is Sarah. Ma'am, this is Colonel Mike Torres, United States Air Force. We need to meet and discuss a matter of national security. Sarah felt like someone had just punched her in the stomach. Her grip on the phone got so tight her knuckles turned white. I think you have the wrong number, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Negative, ma'am. We know exactly who you are. We know about Top Gun. We know about your service record. We know about Lieutenant Alex Reeves. At the mention of Alex's name, Sarah's face went completely white. She felt dizzy and had to grab the edge of the table to steady herself. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Ma'am, we know you're Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Phoenix Chin, United States Navy. We know you graduated first in your Top Gun class in 2010. We know you flew F-18 Super Hornets in combat missions over Syria and Afghanistan. We know you voluntarily left active duty 13 years ago after the incident that killed your wingman. Sarah hung up the phone immediately. It rang again 10 seconds later. She stared at it, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Finally, Sarah grabbed the phone cord and yanked it out of the wall. Her cell phone started ringing. Sarah turned it off and sat in her kitchen, shaking. For 13 years, she had built a wall between her old life and her new one. She had changed her name slightly, moved to a different state, gotten a completely civilian job. She had thought she was safe. She had thought the past couldn't find her. She was wrong. Sarah went to her bedroom and opened the closet door. Behind her winter coats, pushed way back in the corner, was a small metal lockbox. She hadn't opened it in 5 years. Her hands shook as she entered the combination. 0-7-1-5. July 15th. The day Alex died. Inside the box were things from her old life. Military ID cards with her picture looking young and confident. Medals and ribbons she had earned for bravery and skill. And photographs. The first photo showed her standing next to an F-18 Super Hornet fighter jet. She was wearing a flight suit and helmet, looking strong and fearless. Her call sign, Phoenix, was painted on the side of the aircraft. In the photo she looked like she could take on the world and win. The second photo was harder to look at. It showed her with Lieutenant Alex Reeves, her wingman and best friend. They were both in flight suits, arms around each other's shoulders after a successful mission. Alex was grinning his usual crazy grin. Sarah looked genuinely happy. Alex had been 28 years old when he died. Blonde hair, blue eyes, from a small town in Kansas. He wanted to be a commercial airline pilot after he got out of the Navy. He wanted to marry his girlfriend Katie and have kids and live a normal, peaceful life. Instead, he died in a ball of fire over the Syrian desert because Sarah froze up in combat. Sarah closed the box quickly and shoved it back in the closet. She couldn't think about that now. She couldn't let the past destroy the life she had built. But deep down she knew it was already too late. The next morning, Sarah got up early and drove to school like always. She was walking across the parking lot, carrying her bag full of worksheets and lesson plans, when a black SUV pulled up next to the sidewalk. A tall man in Air Force dress blue uniform got out. He was about 50 years old, with gray hair and serious brown eyes. Sarah knew immediately that this was Colonel Torres, the man who had called her. Lieutenant Colonel Chin, he said in his Texas accent. It's Miss Chin now, Sarah replied, not stopping. And I'm late for work. Ma'am, we need to talk. It's a matter of national security. Colonel Torres pulled out a file folder with Top Secret stamped across the front in red letters. Other teachers walking into the school were starting to stare. My country already got everything it needed from me 13 years ago, Sarah said. I'm done with that life. Ma'am, your country is in danger. We need the best pilots we can find, and you're one of them. Find someone else. Sarah kept walking, but Colonel Torres followed her. Ma'am, what happened to Lieutenant Reeves wasn't your fault. Sarah stopped walking so suddenly that Torres almost ran into her. Several teachers nearby turned to look at them with curious expressions. Don't, Sarah said, her voice sharp as a knife. Not here. Not ever. Then where? Because this conversation is happening one way or another. Sarah looked around. Parents were dropping off their children. Teachers were heading into the building. Everything was normal and peaceful, exactly the way she wanted her life to be. After school, she said finally. My classroom. 4 o'clock. Colonel Torres nodded. Thank you, ma'am. Sarah spent the entire day trying to focus on teaching, but her mind kept wandering. During math lessons, she found herself thinking about aircraft specifications. During reading time, she remembered the feeling of pulling G-forces in a steep climb. During lunch, she could almost hear the roar of jet engines. The children noticed she was distracted. Miss Chin, are you okay? asked Emma, a quiet girl with red pigtails. You seem sad. I'm fine, sweetheart, Sarah said, forcing a smile. Just thinking about grown-up stuff. At 4 o'clock, after all the children had gone home, Colonel Torres came to Sarah's classroom. He looked ridiculous sitting in one of the tiny student desks, his long legs folded up awkwardly. Sarah stood by the window, looking out at the playground where children had been playing happily just an hour ago. 13 years, she said without turning around. 13 years I've been out of the military. I'm a civilian now. I teach children. I grade papers. I live a quiet, safe life. Yes, ma'am, I know. And I'm sorry to disturb that. But we need you. Find someone else. Colonel Torres opened his file. Ma'am, 3 days ago, an enemy nation launched a new type of stealth aircraft. We call them shadow wings. They're completely invisible to our radar systems and they carry weapons capable of destroying entire city blocks. Sarah didn't respond. Intelligence indicates they plan to attack major American cities. Power plants, water treatment facilities, communication centers. If they succeed, millions of people will die. So stop them. We're trying, ma'am. But these aircraft use technology we've never seen before. They're faster than our F-22 Raptors and virtually impossible to track. Sarah finally turned around. The F-22 is the most advanced fighter in the world. If it can't handle these threats, nothing can. That's what we thought too. We sent our best pilots up in F-22s to intercept the shadow wings. Torres paused. We lost 2 aircraft yesterday. Both pilots killed. Sarah felt a familiar chill run down her spine. Good pilots were dead. It was happening all over again. We ran computer simulations to find pilots with the specific skills needed for this mission, Torres continued. We need someone with Top Gun training, F-22 experience, and deep knowledge of stealth aircraft countermeasures. The computer gave us 3 names. And? Captain Williams died in a training accident 5 years ago. Commander Jackson is deployed in Germany and can't get back in time. Torres looked directly at Sarah. And the 3rd name was Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Phoenix Chin, currently teaching elementary school in Ohio. Sarah walked to her desk and sat down heavily. I don't fly anymore, Colonel. Ma'am, I wish we had a choice. But we don't. Torres pulled out a set of official military orders. By authority of the President of the United States, under the National Defense Authorization Act, you are hereby recalled to active duty effective immediately. Sarah took the papers with trembling hands. The official government seal was at the top, followed by her name and rank. You can't do this to me, she whispered. Ma'am, under federal law, all military officers remain subject to recall for national emergencies. This qualifies. What if I refuse? Torres's expression softened slightly. Then millions of innocent Americans will die. And you'll spend the rest of your life in a military prison for refusing direct orders during wartime. Sarah stared at the recall orders. Her peaceful life, her classroom, her students, it was all being torn away from her. I haven't been in a cockpit for 13 years, she said. We'll get you current fast, ma'am. I buried that part of myself, Colonel. Lieutenant Colonel Chen is dead. Then we need to bring her back to life. Because right now, Phoenix is the only pilot who might be able to save this country. Hearing her old call sign made Sarah close her eyes tight. Phoenix, the bird that rises from its own ashes. Her squadron mates had given her that name because she always found a way to survive impossible situations. Except for the one time when Alex paid the price for her survival. I need time to think, Sarah said. Ma'am, you have until 0800 tomorrow morning to report to Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. A military transport will pick you up at Wright-Patterson at 0600. What do I tell the school? What do I tell my students? Tell them you have a family emergency. Tell them you'll be back as soon as possible. Torres stood up to leave, then turned back. Ma'am, I've read your file. What happened in Syria wasn't your fault. Sometimes good people die in war, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. You weren't there, Colonel. No, ma'am, I wasn't. But I've been in combat, and I know that second-guessing yourself is a luxury we can't afford when lives are at stake. After Torres left, Sarah sat alone in her classroom for 2 hours. The building was empty and quiet. Sunlight slanted through the windows, highlighting the children's artwork on the walls. Math problems she had written on the whiteboard that morning looked innocent and simple compared to the complex calculations needed to fly a fighter jet in combat. Finally, Sarah pulled out her cell phone and called Janet. Hello. Janet, it's Sarah. I need to take some time off work. There's been a family emergency. Oh no. Is everything okay? Do you need anything? Sarah looked around her classroom one more time. At the small desks where children learned basic math. At the books they read about simple adventures. At the safe, peaceful world she had created for herself. "I hope it will be okay," she said. "I really hope so." That night, Sarah packed a small bag with civilian clothes. She left a letter for her landlord explaining she would be away indefinitely. She called the school principal and arranged for a substitute teacher. Then she sat at her kitchen table and opened her laptop. She typed in passwords she hadn't used in 13 years. Military databases appeared on her screen, full of classified information about aircraft capabilities, enemy threats, and tactical procedures. Sarah read for 6 hours straight, relearning everything she had tried to forget. F-22 specifications. Stealth technology. Air-to-air combat tactics. It all came flooding back like a dam bursting inside her mind. At 4 a.m. she finally closed the laptop and tried to get some sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alex's face. The military transport picked her up right on time. Sarah sat in the back of the cargo plane wearing civilian clothes, surrounded by boxes of military equipment. She was the only passenger. For 4 hours she stared out the small window and watched America pass by below. Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada looked exactly the same as she remembered. The sign at the gate still read, "Home of the Weapons School." Young airmen in uniform walked around looking busy and important. Fighter jets sat on the flight line, ready for action. Sarah stood at the main gate wearing jeans and a sweater, holding her recall orders. The security guard, who couldn't have been more than 20 years old, checked her ID against his computer. "Ma'am, this says you're Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chin?" "That's correct." The young airman looked confused. "But you look like... I mean, you're dressed like a regular person." "Looks can be deceiving, son." Inside the base, Sarah walked past rows of fighter aircraft. F-16 Fighting Falcons, F-22 Raptors, and other jets she recognized from her years of service. Pilots in flight suits walked around discussing missions and training exercises. Sarah felt like she was walking through a museum of her old life. Everything looked familiar, but it felt strange and foreign at the same time. She was 42 years old now, not the young hotshot pilot who had left the military 13 years ago. Colonel Torres met her at the main operations building. He was wearing a flight suit now instead of his dress uniform. "Welcome back to Nellis, Phoenix." "Don't call me that name." "That's who you are, ma'am. That's who we need you to be." They walked into a briefing room where several other officers were waiting. On the wall were photographs and technical drawings of aircraft unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. "These are what we're up against," Torres said, pointing to the images. "Enemy designation, Shadow Wing. Length, 65 feet. Wingspan, 40 feet. Top speed, Mach 2.8. Maximum altitude, 70,000 feet. And completely invisible to conventional radar." Sarah studied the photographs. The Shadow Wing aircraft were sleek and angular, built for speed and stealth. They looked deadly. "How many do they have?" she asked. "Intelligence estimates at least 12 operational aircraft, possibly more." "What are their targets?" "Major population centers. Critical infrastructure. They want to cripple our ability to function as a nation and kill as many civilians as possible." Sarah felt her teacher instincts kick in. She thought about her students back in Ohio. Tommy with his gap-toothed grin, Emma with her red pigtails. All the innocent children who had no idea this threat existed. "Show me what we have to fight them with," she said. They walked to a secure hangar where a single F-22 Raptor sat waiting. It was painted in standard Air Force gray and looked magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Angular and aggressive, built for air superiority and stealth. "This is your aircraft," Torres said. "We've modified it with experimental sensors and weapons systems specifically designed to detect and engage stealth targets." Sarah walked slowly around the F-22, touching the smooth composite skin. Memories flooded back. The feeling of massive thrust pushing her back in her seat during takeoff. The incredible sensation of flying faster than the speed of sound. The deadly ballet of air-to-air combat. "I'm not the same person I was 13 years ago," she said quietly. "No, ma'am. You're better. You have experience that can't be taught in any school. And you have something worth fighting for now." "What's that?" "The life you built. The children you teach. The normal world you've grown to love." Sarah climbed a ladder to look into the F-22's cockpit. It was exactly as she remembered, hundreds of switches, screens, and controls arranged in perfect order. Her hands knew where every button was located. "My wingman died because of my mistakes," she said. "Alex Reeves died because war is dangerous and unpredictable. Not because of anything you did wrong. Sarah's hands gripped the edge of the cockpit. We were outnumbered 4-2. I had a clear shot at the enemy leader, but I hesitated. I froze up right in the middle of combat. Alex had to break formation to cover for me. He got shot down protecting me because I couldn't do my job. That's not what the official report says. I don't care about the official report. I know what really happened. Torres pulled out a small digital recorder. Alex's final radio transmission. Do you want to hear it? Sarah shook her head no, but Torres played it anyway. Alex's voice came through the speaker, clear and calm despite the fact that his aircraft was on fire and falling out of the sky. Phoenix, you saved my life twice today. Don't you dare blame yourself for this. You're the best pilot I ever flew with. Take care of yourself, okay? I'll see you on the other side. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't cried in 13 years. He forgave you, Torres said gently. Maybe it's time you forgave yourself. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Sarah's entire life. Every morning she put on a flight suit and tried to remember how to be a fighter pilot. Every day she climbed into the F-22 and pushed herself to fly faster, higher, and more aggressively. Her body remembered the basic skills. How to start the engines, how to taxi and take off, how to navigate using the aircraft's complex systems. But her mind fought against it every step of the way. The first time she tried to fire the F-22's 20mm cannon, her finger froze on the trigger. She couldn't make herself pull it. The first time she attempted high-G combat maneuvers, she got violently sick and had to land immediately. The first time she flew at the F-22's maximum speed of Mach 2.25, she had a full panic attack and almost crashed into the desert. But slowly, day by day, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Phoenix Chin started to come back to life. Other pilots at Nellis whispered about her in the hallways and the mess hall. They had heard the stories and legends. The woman who graduated first in her Top Gun class. The pilot who shot down 6 enemy aircraft in a single mission over Syria. The legend who had disappeared from the military 13 years ago. But looking at her now, quiet, careful, obviously struggling with fear, some of them wondered if the stories were even true. She doesn't look like much, said Captain Rodriguez, a 28-year-old F-22 pilot who had never been in real combat. Don't judge a book by its cover, son, replied his squadron commander, a veteran pilot who knew Sarah's reputation. Phoenix was the best we ever produced. If she's here, it's because we're in serious trouble. On her 15th day of training, Sarah was flying a practice mission when alarms started blaring across the entire base. This is not a drill, came the announcement over the loudspeakers. Enemy aircraft have penetrated United States airspace. All pilots report to your aircraft immediately. Sarah was already airborne, so she turned toward the communications tower. Control, this is Phoenix. What's the situation? Phoenix, we have multiple Shadow Wing aircraft heading toward major population centers on the East Coast. New York, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia. You're our only pilot with the training to engage them. Sarah felt ice water flow through her veins. This was it. Everything she had trained for, everything she had tried to forget, was about to be put to the ultimate test. Phoenix copies. I'm inbound. Be advised, these targets are extremely dangerous. We've already lost 3 F-22s trying to intercept them. 3 more pilots dead. Sarah pushed the thought out of her mind and focused on flying. Understood, control. Phoenix is en route to intercept. Sarah pushed her F-22's throttles to full afterburner. The powerful engines roared to life, accelerating her to twice the speed of sound in less than a minute. The landscape below became a blur as she raced toward the east coast. Phoenix, first target is bearing 090, altitude 35,000 feet, speed Mach 2.6. Be advised, we have no radar contact. You're flying blind. Copy that. Sarah activated the F-22's experimental stealth detection systems. On her screen, a faint, ghostly outline appeared. The Shadow Wing aircraft was there, barely visible but definitely real. Tally target, she reported. Moving to engage. What followed was the most intense aerial combat of Sarah's career. The enemy pilot was incredibly skilled, flying an aircraft that could outturn and outclimb anything Sarah had ever faced. For 20 minutes they chased each other through the sky above Pennsylvania, rolling and climbing and diving at speeds that would kill an ordinary person. The Shadow Wing aircraft fired advanced missiles that Sarah barely managed to avoid. She fired back, but the enemy plane's stealth capabilities made it almost impossible to get a solid lock. Finally, Sarah remembered something from her Top Gun training. Instead of trying to chase the enemy aircraft, she predicted where it would be and positioned herself accordingly. When the Shadow Wing pilot made his next turn, Sarah was waiting. Fox 2, she called, firing a heat-seeking missile. The enemy aircraft exploded in a brilliant fireball. Splash 1 bandit, Sarah reported, breathing hard. Outstanding work, Phoenix. But we have 11 more targets inbound. For the next 8 hours, Sarah flew mission after mission. She refueled from aerial tanker aircraft without landing. She fought enemy pilots who were among the best in the world. She shot down 6 Shadow Wing aircraft, more than any other pilot in history. But the enemy was learning too. They started working together, using coordinated tactics that Sarah had never encountered. On her 9th mission of the day, Sarah found herself in the worst possible situation, surrounded by 3 Shadow Wing aircraft above the suburbs of Washington, D.C. They attacked from all directions at once, trying to overwhelm her with superior numbers. Phoenix is engaged defensive, she reported. Multiple bandits, no clear exit route. This was exactly what had happened 13 years ago in Syria. Sarah and Alex surrounded by enemy fighters. Alex had died trying to save her. Sarah felt the old panic starting to rise in her chest. Her hands began to shake on the flight controls. The enemy aircraft were closing in, their weapon systems locked onto her F-22. Then she heard Alex's voice in her memory, "You're the best pilot I ever flew with." Sarah took a deep breath and forced herself to think clearly. She wasn't the same person who had frozen up 13 years ago. She was older, wiser, and she had people depending on her. Millions of innocent Americans. Her students back in Ohio. Everyone living normal, peaceful lives. Phoenix engaging multiple targets. Sarah did something that should have been impossible. She pointed her F-22 straight up and climbed vertically at full power, pulling almost 9 gs of force. The enemy pilots followed her up, but they couldn't match the F-22's incredible climb rate. At 50,000 feet, Sarah rolled her aircraft upside down and dove back toward the enemy planes. Now she was behind all 3 of them in perfect firing position. Fox 2. Fox 2. Fox 2. She fired 3 missiles in rapid succession. All 3 enemy aircraft exploded within seconds of each other. Splash 3 bandits, Sarah reported. Phoenix, that was incredible flying. How did you do that? But Sarah was already thinking about the next threat. Intelligence reported that the final Shadow Wing aircraft was approaching Washington, D.C. from the south. If it reached the Capitol, it could destroy the White House, the Capitol building, and kill thousands of people. Sarah's F-22 was battle-damaged and running low on fuel, but she turned south anyway. Phoenix, your aircraft is not mission-capable. Return to base immediately. Negative control. I have one more target to kill. Sarah found the last enemy aircraft just as it began its attack run on downtown Washington. Below them, millions of people went about their daily lives, completely unaware that death was approaching from 40,000 feet above. Sarah's radar was damaged and her weapons systems were malfunctioning. She would have to get close and use her cannon, the most dangerous way to attack another fighter aircraft. The enemy pilot was the best she had faced all day. He knew Sarah was coming and turned to meet her head-on. The 2 aircraft danced through the sky above the Potomac River, each trying to gain the advantage for a killing shot. Sarah's F-22 was falling apart around her. Warning lights flashed red all over her instrument panel. Engine fire warnings, hydraulic system failures, flight control damage. The aircraft was barely controllable. But she kept fighting. The enemy pilot was good, but he made one crucial mistake. He turned too aggressively and lost airspeed for just a moment. Sarah was ready and waiting. She pressed the cannon trigger. Her 20mm Gatling gun fired 100 rounds per second, sending a stream of explosive shells into the Shadow Wing aircraft. It disintegrated in a massive fireball just 3 miles from the Washington Monument. Splash final bandit, Sarah reported. All threats eliminated. But Sarah's victory came at a price. Both of her F-22's engines were on fire now. The flight controls barely responded. The aircraft was going down whether she wanted it to or not. Phoenix, eject immediately. Your aircraft is not recoverable. Sarah looked down at the city below her. If she ejected now, her burning F-22 might crash into buildings or neighborhoods. Innocent people could be killed. Negative control. I'm staying with her to make sure she hits the river. Sarah fought to keep the dying F-22 pointed away from populated areas. The aircraft bucked and rolled like an angry bull. Fire spread through the cockpit, and she could smell smoke through her oxygen mask. At the last possible second, when she was sure the aircraft would hit the Potomac River instead of the city, Sarah pulled both ejection seat handles. The rocket-powered seat blasted her out of the cockpit with tremendous force. Her parachute opened automatically just as the F-22 hit the water in a huge explosion that could be seen for miles. Sarah landed in the cold river, bruised and burned but miraculously alive. Coast Guard rescue boats reached her within 5 minutes. A week later, Sarah stood in the Oval Office wearing a crisp new Air Force uniform. The President of the United States pinned the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration, on her chest. "Lieutenant Colonel Chin," the President said, "your actions saved countless American lives. The nation owes you an enormous debt of gratitude." "Thank you, Mr. President. But I'd like to request immediate return to inactive status." The President looked surprised. "You want to go back to teaching school?" "Yes, sir. That's who I am now." "You're also Phoenix, one of the greatest fighter pilots this country has ever produced." Sarah looked out the Oval Office windows at ordinary people walking down Pennsylvania Avenue. People living safe, normal, beautiful lives. "Phoenix did her job, sir. Now I'd like to go home to my real life." "If that's what you want, Colonel. But know that your country will always be grateful." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in front of her third-grade classroom once again. The children cheered when she walked in and several of them ran up to hug her. "Miss Chin, you're back," shouted Tommy. "We missed you so much. Are you feeling better?" Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time in months. "Yes, Tommy. I'm feeling much better." "Where were you?" "Mrs. Johnson was nice, but she wasn't as good at explaining fractions as you are." Sarah looked around at all the eager young faces. These children represented everything she had fought to protect. Their innocence, their hope, their right to grow up in a peaceful world. "I had to help with a family emergency," she said. "But I'm back now and I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon during recess, Janet found Sarah in the teacher's lounge. "Welcome back, girl. You look different somehow. More confident or something." Sarah thought about it. "I guess I remembered something important while I was away." "What's that?" "That sometimes the most important battles are fought by people who would rather be doing something else entirely." Janet looked confused, but she didn't ask for clarification. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment grading the math worksheets her students had completed during her absence. On her desk was a new photograph, her entire class smiling and waving at the camera on the day she returned. Next to it was the old photograph of her and Alex from 13 years ago. Sarah looked at both pictures and smiled peacefully. She was Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Phoenix Chin, one of the greatest fighter pilots who ever lived. She had saved her country from a terrible threat and earned the highest honor America could bestow. She was also Miss Chin, third-grade math teacher. She helped children learn fractions and long division. She wiped away tears when they skinned their knees at recess. She encouraged them to do their best and never give up. For the first time in 13 years, Sarah was completely at peace with being both people. Outside her apartment window, the October sky was clear and quiet. Commercial airliners flew peacefully overhead, carrying families to visit relatives and businesspeople to important meetings. Sarah had made that peace possible. But if her country ever needed Phoenix again, if innocent people were threatened and only she could help, Sarah would be ready. The quiet math teacher who saved America would answer the call, just as she always had. For now, though, she was content to grade papers and plan tomorrow's lessons about multiplying fractions. It was a good life. A peaceful life. A life worth protecting. And Sarah Chin, teacher, pilot, guardian angel, wouldn't have it any other way.